Hey, Rich Newmonth. So here's where I give the March and April movies and shows that I watched from worst to best. There isn't combining March and April's because I only saw two movies in March, so I'm combining March and April to make six. In last place, Starbright. From the trailers, I was expecting a fantasy movie similar to Stardust. It was nothing like Stardust. At all. The trailers promise a fantasy type movie, but it's not that. I have no idea what this movie was supposed to be, and I don't think the movie does either. It's 2.5 hours and has an overstuffed plot with thin, boring characters. It tries to be a crime thriller, also trying to be a fantasy movie, also wanting to be a romance movie, and it does not mix the various tones or genres well at all. It's like when you can't decide what leftovers you want for lunch, so you just combine the last 2 or 3 days of leftovers into one meal, and you end up with this bizarre hodgepodge. The script basically has no logic to it. Like, there's a scene where the bad guys are testing a machine for their heist, and it's a toy truck with a magnet attached, and that magnet is strong enough to lift a manhole cover. The leading lady gives a decent enough performance, but the love interest they pair her with has no chemistry, and frankly, he's kind of dumb. She says her name is Aisha, and it's Gaelic, and he asks, "Oh, you're Irish?" as if her extremely obvious Irish accent wasn't enough of a giveaway. John Rhys Davies is the film's one bright spot. He's a good mix of wise mentor as well as wisecracking comic relief. Unfortunately, the film's tone, plot, and characters are all over the place and incompetent, making this a very disappointing and frankly kind of boring and confusing watch. I thought maybe it's just me, so I went to see what the Rotten Tomatoes score is, and I kid you not, there's not a single critic review for this film. It was so bad, it wasn't even screened for critics. Yikes. If you want a good version of this movie, just watch 2007's Stardust. Number 5, Hoppers. For a kids' movie, this is pretty solid. For a Pixar movie, it's below their usual level of quality. And considering that this is from the same writer as We Bare Bears, which is a very sharp, witty series, there's not a lot of jokes or anything particularly outside the box. It also doesn't help that the animation on the humans is horrendous. I'm not a fan of that bean mouth style that for some reason is still popular. It looks very unnerving, and when you compare the human designs and animation to, say, The Incredibles or Inside Out, it looks so out of place. Given the out there premise of putting a human brain into a robot beaver, this feels like this should be stronger. Pixar has done weirder stuff. A movie about a rat who wants to be a chef, a movie about a guy who ties balloons to his house. There's a reason these movies are memorable. This does not have anything particularly memorable that makes it stand out from the more forgettable Pixar entries like The Good Dinosaur or Brave. The film's soundtrack consists of generic pop songs, which feel very out of place for a Pixar film. The message isn't done in a way that's particularly innovative. It's already been seen in Avatar, which the film name drops, while Thornberries, the Lorax, the Ant Bully just falls into that run-of-the-mill category and gets mixed in with those. The movie is more of a 100-minute PSA you'd see on a Saturday morning, and it feels like the movie was made not out of passion like the best of Pixar, but merely so Disney could add it to the Animal Kingdom section of Disney World of Florida, since that park is their least popular and is essentially an overpriced zoo. The film's heavy-handed message of big business is bad and businesses and politicians need to be more ethical comes across as so insincere and hypocritical, considering this is a movie from Disney, one of the most unethical companies in the world. Its execution comes across as very finger-wagging and rules for thee, but not for me. Also, the third act of this movie is surprisingly dark for a kid's film, and it's probably the darkest direction Pixar has ever taken a film. The animals band together in a plot to kill the humans for their destroying nature, and the third act becomes reminiscent of The Birds, Jaws, Anaconda, a lot of animal-centered horror films, and there's a lot of pretty nightmarish imagery, so if you have sensitive kids, I'd say wait to stream it so you can fast forward past anything too intense. It's not as cutesy as the trailers make it seem. There is a small bit of charm to the movie, but overall it comes across like a product rather than passion, and an execution that seems hypocritical. Number 4, Malcolm in the Middle, Life's Still Unfair. The humor is still chaotic, fast-paced, and just the right amount of unhinged. It still has that signature everything goes wrong in the worst possible way energy that made the original series so special. The timing, the tone, even the way the scenes escalate, it all feels authentic to what Malcolm in the Middle was doing at its peak. One of the biggest surprises for me was Dewey's recast. Recasting a character like that is risky, but they absolutely got it right. He looks and feels like Dewey, and most importantly, acts like him, and never feels distracting, which was honestly kind of impressive. And then there's Stevie, but how is Stevie still alive? I don't mean that in a bad way. It just feels like something they were just shown and done, just quietly acknowledging the absurdity without fully explaining it. But like he's got like all these disability conditions. Like, how is he still alive? Like, you think he would have like not been in the show. But now, not everything works perfectly though, because episode 3 has a subplot with Hal in a clinic where he's hallucinating, and that's where the show falls a bit. The joke was funny at first, but it goes on for way too long. It really should have been like this quick 1 or 2 scene gag, but not an entire B plot stretched across the entire episode, which is what they did. The biggest issue with the third episode is the pacing, because just when you think that bit is finally over, it keeps going and going and going. It starts being funny and just becomes exhausting, which is rare for the show because it usually knows exactly when to cut away. But outside of that, there's a lot to love, especially with Malcolm's daughter. She is such a great addition. You can immediately see that she takes after Malcolm. Same energy, same attitude, same awkwardness. The actress absolutely sells it. She's genuinely a standout and adds a fresh dynamic to the show without feeling like a replacement for anything. That's really what the survival does best. It builds forward while still honoring what came before. It's also just fun seeing where everyone ended up. The show doesn't try to reset the characters, it lets them grow while still keeping their core personalities intact. Everyone feels older, but not different in a way that breaks the show. And just like the original series, beneath all the chaos, dysfunction, and ridiculous hijinks, it still ends on something heartfelt. That emotional core is still there. It still reminds you that, yes, the family is a mess, but they still love each other at the end of the day. By the end, it leaves you feeling warm in that very specific and Malcolm in the Middle way. Honestly, I really hope we get a season 2. There's so much potential here with everything they've set up, especially with the next generation of characters. Number 3, Stranger Things Tales from 85. Do I think the show was unnecessary? Yes. Did I still enjoy it? Yes. Compared to the later seasons of the original show, this was pretty good. It went back to what made the show so good in the first place. It has been toned down somewhat for a family audience, getting a PG rating instead of PG-13, but it's the same level of spooky as like Goosebumps and Monster House, and that's what it reminded me of. It helps if you look at the show as non-canon, because otherwise a few questions are raised, like how come they never talk about this new character Nikki, or the events of what happens in this series? It does hint that a season 2 is planned, so maybe if the show continues it will fix that issue, but for now it's easier just to think of this as non-canon. It does repeat a few story beats from the original show, like they have a teacher who knows information about the monster. In her case, she knows about evolution, while the science teacher in the live action series knows about parallel dimensions. And it does have better story and character writing in seasons 3 through 5 than the live action series did. If you go into the mindset that it's made for kids, it doesn't have any impact on the events of the main series, it's enjoyable and almost makes you forget about the downfall of the live action series. Almost. Our runner up, and this is a very close second, is Project Hail Mary. While I'd say I enjoyed Solo, a Star Wars story, part of me has always wondered what you missed out on when Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were replaced by Ron Howard. Project Hail Mary kind of feels like the answer to that question, and it just makes that what if hurt even more. Because this is the version of blockbuster filmmaking that leads to personality, creativity, and emotional sincerity without sacrificing scale. And if this movie is even partly the reason that Spider-Verse 3 is taking so long, I forgive them, because this movie absolutely blew past my expectations. Going in, I was expecting something like a solid B-tier sci-fi film. Smart, maybe a little slow, probably carried by Ryan Gosling. Instead, I got one of the most emotionally engaging sci-fi movies in years. Not only does it have that signature Lord and Miller energy with fast, witty, clever dialogue, it also has a surprising amount of heart. I genuinely did not expect to get choked up at least 3 separate times, and none of it feels manipulative. It earns those moments. The story follows the man who wakes up alone on a spaceship with no memory of who he is or why he's there. As his memories slowly return, he realizes he's on a mission to save Earth from a catastrophic cosmic threat that's already begun affecting the sun. What makes the film really interesting is how it tells the story. The narrative jumps to present-day survival in space and flashbacks that slowly piece together how he got there, who he was before, and what's at stake. It turns what could have been a straightforward survival story into something more layered and character-driven. At times, this really feels like classic Star Trek, heavy on problem-solving, scientific reasoning, and moral questions, but it also pulls emotional and thematic DNA from films like Interstellar and Arrival. So there's a lot of science talk, a lot of figuring things out scenes, surprisingly deep emotional beats, and somehow it balances all of that with humor that never undercuts the stakes. Ryan Gosling absolutely carries the movie, but not in the ways you'd expect. Instead of playing it cooler and detached, he goes into more awkward, human, slightly panicked energy. He's funny, he's vulnerable, he's relatable, and because the movie spends so much time with him alone, that performance has to work, and it really does. There's a relationship in the movie between him and the alien that becomes the emotional backbone of the entire story, and that's where the film goes from really good sci-fi to something genuinely special. It explores themes like isolation, trust, and sacrifice, and that's where those tearjerker moments come from, and they hit hard. I don't think the PG-13 rating was because of content. It's because it's complex. This is a movie that takes its time, explains the science, builds its emotional arc slowly. So younger kids might just find it dense or slow, but for middle-aged and up, especially anyone who likes sci-fi, it's incredibly rewarding. This movie is better than the trailers, which are already really good. It's smart without being pretentious, it's emotional without being cheesy, and it's funny without breaking immersion. Lord and Miller prove again why they're one of the best directing duos of the last 15 years, and I'm even more excited for whatever they do next. And in first place, like I said, this is a very hard decision. It was a toss-up between this one or this number one. My number one is Mario Galaxy. This is exactly what a great sequel is supposed to be. Instead of just repeating the same formula as the first film, it expands everything story, characters, and especially the world in a way that feels bigger, bolder, and more imaginative. Now, one of my biggest issues with this first Super Mario Bros. Movie was the use of the pop songs. They felt out of place and pulled me out of the experience. This time, that issue is completely fixed. The film leans fully into its musical score, and it makes a huge difference. The orchestral space-inspired soundtrack gives the movie a sense of scale and wonder that perfectly matches the galaxy-hopping adventure. It feels cinematic in a way the first movie didn't quite reach. Speaking of adventure, the movie goes all in. It's a full-on galaxy-trotting journey packed with creativity. Fans of the Super Mario games are going to have a blast spotting familiar planets. But even beyond that, film introduces new worlds that feel just as imaginative and fitting within the Mario universe. It's a smorgasbord of Nintendo Easter eggs, and you can tell the filmmakers really love this franchise. At times, the movie even dips into full-on space opera territory. There's a sequence on a casino planet that feels heavily inspired by Star Wars The Last Jedi, meaning it's very reminiscent of the planet Canto Bight, with a larger-than-life villain who gives off serious Jabba the Hutt vibes. It's an influence that actually works, adding a fun layer of genre blending. What really elevates the movie, though, is the heart. At its core, it's a positive pro-family story, and emphasizes connection, loyalty, and growth in a way that feels genuine and uplifting without being preachy. That emotional grounding keeps the film from just being spectacle. It gives it meaning. The comedy is another standout. The jokes themselves are solid, but what really sells them is the animation. The characters are so expressive that even a simple reaction can make a moment a lot funnier. There are times when the humor doesn't come from the punchline itself, but from how the characters respond, and that's where the animation truly shines. And honestly, I have no idea why the movie is rated PG. This is a G-rated film through and through. There's no profanity or innuendo or anything otherwise questionable, just pure family-friendly entertainment. At the end of the day, Super Mario Galaxy builds on everything that worked in the first movie and fixes what did not. It's bigger, more emotional, more visually creative, and more confident in its identity. And it comes in at number one as the ranking for the month of March and April. If you're going to share any of the movies and shows you watched that were released in the month of March or April 2026, or even just April, you can do whatever you want. I'll see you next time.